From CGTN headquarters in Beijing, this is The Hub with Wang Guan.
Hello and welcome to The Hub. I'm Qinduo, sitting in for Wang Guan. It's been 2 days since Israel launched Operation Rising Lion. On June 13th, over 200 warplanes and covered Mossad drones struck more than 100 targets from Natanz nuclear infrastructure to military bases, government buildings and residential districts in Tehran and elsewhere. Iran responded swiftly. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian denounced the attack as criminal aggression and vowed that Israel will pay the price in a legal and justified way. In turn, Iran launched drones and missiles at Israel overnight, marking a sharp escalation in the conflict. So why now? What strategic factors prompted Israel's decision? And what are the consequences for both nations and wider region? Had this confrontation escalated into a full-blown crisis? And is any path to peace still in sight? To help us make sense of these fast-moving developments, we are joined by a panel of distinguished experts. In Tehran, we have Mohammad Marandi, professor at Tehran University. In Beijing, we have Zhou Rong, senior analyst from the Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China. And in our studio in Beijing, we have Einar Tangen, senior fellow at Taihe Institute and chairman of Asia Narratives Substack. Gentlemen, welcome to the Hub. Anna, we'll start with you. We know that from what we know right now, seems the loss on the Iranian side is heavy. What's your assessment? You know, if you look at the targets, top generals, and also nuclear scientists, nuclear infrastructure, and the military commander, commanding control centers, etc., seems quite heavy loss for Iranian.
Yeah, you have to look what's behind it. This operation would have taken, literally months to prepare, to know exactly where all of these individuals are at the point that they intend to attack, where all these operational centers are. Tremendous amount of coordination. You don't just send 200 planes in the air and think, just go bomb Tehran. That's not the way it works. They had precision targets they were going after, and they did not care about civilian casualties. This was not a provoked incident. This is not legal under the United Nations Charter. This is simply something that Israel has been begging Donald Trump to do, and Donald Trump, having reached an impasse in his negotiations with Iran, just let the dog loose.
Well, well said. Professor Zhou Rong there, as Anna mentioned, there's a little background, obviously, adding to this, the attack is not only the attack, but also what happened before or around the same time. So 2 days before the start of another round of negotiation between the Iranians and the U.S., and then there's the attack. And what's your understanding of the background? Why, what are the major factors the Israelis probably have in their mind in terms of launching this attack?
It's me?
Yes, Mr. Zhou, please.
Yes, okay. I think we should just prepare into the two parts. Number one is Israeli prepare for this kind of attack for a long time. Israelis' analyses are very different from America. Americans think Iran is not ready, does not have a capacity to build a nuclear bomb, but Israel does not think so. So Israel thinks that during the Gaza war, Iran has speed up their preparation for the nuclear bomb. So Israel cannot be patient as long as it can. So Israel, we must strike Iran if not too late. So this time the strike, we can say the two things. One is a strike to the officers who is in charge of the Revolutionary Guard, and also the second strike still target officers of those to succeed, those who were killed the day before, so that Israel wanted to prevent Iranians, what we say, the region to recover from such initial shock strike. And for implication. Let's say, if we just combine these two countries together, something about the 100 million population, two are the big regional power of the Middle East. That will not only influence Iran and Israel, but also influence the whole Middle East, especially Americans worried about whether their military facility in the Gulf, especially Kuwait, Qatar, as well as UAE, can be threatened or can be destroyed. This is one thing. Another thing, and the Arabic country, especially the Gulf country, worried about whether there will be the nuclear radiation, something like that. So, for this case, this is not only the war between Iran and Israel, but it will influence the whole world. Iranian friend told me that it will see whether the world will survive from this kind of war or not. Maybe that is a little bit exaggeration, but anyway, worry is necessary. Thank you.
Now we have Professor Marandi from Iran and Tehran. Welcome to the show, Professor Marandi. So, how are you? How are things on the ground?
Hi, thank you very much for asking. Things here are quiet. People are going about with their normal business. What the Israeli regime has done has basically united Iranians more than ever before. Perhaps I've never seen such unity since during the Saddam Hussein invasion of Iran. And ever since the Iranian military regrouped and began retaliating and air defenses working much more effectively, I think the morale of ordinary people has gone up a great deal.
Well, the Iranian leader has said that the Israeli strikes, they see that as criminal aggression, quote unquote, and vowed a powerful response. Yes, we are seeing the response, which is powerful from Iran. And then what is to what goal and to what degree Iran will say, okay, that's enough. Our response has already been satisfactory.
It will depend on the Israeli regime. The Israeli regime will have to accept this continuing aggression. We have to keep in mind that this is a regime that constantly violates agreements. Right now, it has a ceasefire agreement with Lebanon, but every day it is killing Lebanese citizens. It had a ceasefire agreement in Gaza, and then it continued the genocide again and violated it. So the Iranians know that this is an untrustworthy regime, and there has to be a mechanism set in place where there are assurances that it does not launch another act of aggression against Iran again.
Anna, if you look at the attack, of course, it also attacked this nuclear infrastructure in Natanz in Iran. Of course, people are concerned whether there will be any contamination, whether there will be leading to a disaster unimaginable for not only for this country but also for this region. How likely? What are the chances of?
You should be less concerned about nuclear fallout from these centers than you should be from the fact that Israel has at least 200 nuclear warheads that they could use. They've already dehumanized people. They're willing to kill women and children with snipers. They're willing to break international law. They do not regard Palestinians and Muslims as human beings. So how far does it take to go and pull the nuclear switch? The other thing is their goal seems to be regime change, but as you just heard, that's not going to happen. They've actually solidified support for the government. And for Donald Trump, he thought that this was going to be the masterstroke that would force, like a bully, force Iran to the table and to a negotiating stance that he liked. And instead, it has ended the negotiations. So on all levels, this has been a failed policy with no end in sight.
And you mentioned, of course,
Yes.
the response from Trump. He appeared before the attack that he was against any attack on Iran. In his own words, he preferred a peaceful solution to the problem, preferred the negotiation. But when people look back, it seems like there was indeed a coordination probably between Washington and the Israelis in terms of the attack on Iran.
Well, there had to be. I mean, you think it was just by accident that we had warships stationed in a position so that they could defend Israel? Do you think that the Israelis knew where all of these people were? The fact is, Tehran has to come to grips with the fact that it has some sort of intelligence emergency. How is it that not only on one day they know exactly where everybody is, kill them, and then the next day they mount more attacks and they know exactly where the replacements are? So this is something that Tehran has to do something about. But in the meantime, as I said, there is no end in sight. Donald Trump knew about this. He admitted it. All right. And there's no way that Israel would have gone forward without our support.
What about this, it seems to me there's a discrepancy in terms of understanding of the so-called, nuclear threat from Iran. The Israelis, they justified their attack by saying that, Iran is only a couple of days away from making a nuclear bomb, or in Netanyahu's words, like that there will be a nuclear holocaust. But if you look at the response or comments from the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, she says Iran is not making a nuclear bomb.
Well, yeah, but you have to look at the domestic situation in Israel. Anytime that Netanyahu is being pressed, and he's now being pressed in court, he's also facing very difficult times. He just survived a no confidence motion in his own government. Always around that time, you see a lot of action. Netanyahu has extended his rule in Israel simply by moving from crisis to crisis and declaring that he has to maintain control for the continuity of defense.
A lot of consideration over there. Professor Zhou Rong, if you take a look at another factor, somehow in the timing of the IAEA censure, we know that just days before the airstrike, the IAEA censured Iran for non-compliance. This is the first time in 20 years. They talked about Iran's like a failure to comply with the IAEA rules. What do you make of that? Some people are wondering whether what prompted that kind of censure, and whether that somehow influenced the decision-making process by the Israelis.
Yes, I think the IAEA report is doing in the wrong time. One IAEA did a report that is convince Israel that is Iran is not obeying that regulation of IAEA. So it seems that Israel thinks it's worth doing so. Let me take another thing to talk. One thing that is whether Trump is supporting this strike or not. People may say that Trump said, we are not involved in that. We have not involved in the military action against Iran. But actually, I think the Trump administration at the beginning is passive, and later fully support Israel strike. Mm-hmm. Look at what what Trump said. He said, okay, because we give you 60 days, the deadline 6 days, you did not just give us any kind of dissent, compromise, or what we want. So then we still have the time to just make a deal. Then if it's not too late, if you not want to be destroyed, want to be destructed, please just make a deal with them. So even Trump supported Israel, still just show to the Iranian leader, okay, we can still have the time to make a deal. So I think this time that though we cannot say American is not fully involved in the military action against Iran, but I can say that Trump is slightly happy to see what is happening, because they wanted to punish Iran, but they have no any kind of special excuse to do that. Or because Iran wait a long time. We just wait. We are very impatient for that. So give you a lesson. But what Trump worried is not make the campaign, make the strike escalate. also just threaten the military presence of American in the Middle East. That is what he worried about. But in his mind, he is slightly happy, enjoying such kind of strike.
I was saying that Trump is actually using the military strike against Iran,
Yes.
as a kind of a pressure,
Give more
to
pressure.
pressure Iran to back down in terms of from their stance in the negotiation. All right, let me turn to Professor Marandi. Professor, what do you think of this? Of course, is at least a temporary cancellation of the negotiation with the Americans, which is supposed to happen on Sunday. And how likely that will ever resume? Do you think Iran will have any trust in Washington in terms of negotiating a deal with good faith?
Just one point that I'd like to mention before I respond, and that is that the board of directors at the International Atomic Energy Agency is dominated by the West, like all international bodies that were created after the Second World War. And if you look at the voting, those who were opposed to this motion, to this statement, they constitute the global South, the majority of the global South, the majority population. But the West, being the dominant power, the dominant force in the body, they were able to get this through. And I think that it's quite clear that there is no evidence, there is no physical evidence, that they have not presented any evidence that Iran has violated any of the regulations. Iran is working within the framework of international law, but it is not abiding by the nuclear agreement with the P5+1 because the Americans tore up the deal and the Europeans ignored their commitments. But yes, you're absolutely correct. Iran will probably, as far as I know, Iran will continue to sit at the negotiating table with indirect negotiations, largely because Iran wants to show to the international community, to its friends, that it is not the problem. It is the United States that is conspiring against the country. And the point that my colleagues made earlier about Trump's duplicitous behavior, this I think is very important because in future, no one can trust the United States. When a president of the United States behaves in such a deceitful manner, then how can you trust him in the future? How can you trust him at the negotiating table? And how can you trust him even if you have an agreement to abide by that agreement? This is quite extraordinary. As your other guest said, one day he says one thing, and the very next day he's saying that actually he was supporting this attack. It's quite amazing.
Well, that is a good point, Professor Marandi. I mean, even let's assume there is a deal between Iran and Donald Trump. I mean, he himself could change the next week or the next year, or if there's a new government, say by the Democrats or by another Republican president, they also could overthrow it away. That's what Trump did. Remember, with JCPOA, the agreement Iran reached with the other parties, major powers there. So what is the consideration in negotiating with Washington? So is that solely for, if there's a deal, sanctions would be lifted by Washington? Professor Marandi.
I think it's highly unlikely that we will have a deal. Yes, I think that at this stage, it is highly unlikely that we'll have a deal because of the behavior of the United States, because of the aggression, and because of the striking of civilian targets, the murdering of women and children. If there is an agreement in the distant future, the Iranians will need many more assurances than they would have demanded before. And I still think that the United States cannot be trusted, especially under Trump. So a deal is something very, very distant and something very difficult to imagine right now.
Well, Anna, if you take a look at the effects, regional effects, for example, how do you make the response, by regional countries? Are they worried about the escalation of the tension? In what way they might be affected? in terms of their security and development there?
Well, I mean, everybody's concerned about this. You have a nuclear power, Israel, threatening another country, much larger. It's something that has become racial. And you've seen the Gulf countries and Arabic countries, almost except for very few, have come out and condemned it. They're very concerned. They do not want a regional war. And for some reason, I think Israel is betting on this and that they will sit on their hands. But at some point, they're going to be pushed too far.
Right. Again, there are different explanations of their purpose. One thing is about, okay, they want to engineer a regime change in Iran. Others would say they want to drag the U.S. into the conflict so the U.S. will not withdraw from this region. What's the behind the thinking, the calculation here?
Well, and the third part is that Netanyahu needs a series of crises.
Personal, political,
political things. I mean, it's a little bit of all of it. I mean, Israel does not exist without the U.S. support. Obviously, there's no trust here. What has happened is that at the end of the day, if I'm Iran, I'm more determined than ever, even if I wasn't before, to have a nuclear weapon. Why? To protect myself against a nuclear power that is attacking my country. This is not something that anybody, any country in the Middle East wants. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to have a nuclear arms race that's going to be going into multiple countries at a time when the world is very unstable. We need to be concentrating on economics, not how we can kill more people.
Right. Professor Zhou Rong, I want your
Yes.
analysis comment on this. If you take a look at the response from the big powers, for example, China condemned the attack on Iran because that's a violation of a sovereignty and also violation of the fundamental international principle. And also, China sees that as that kind of behavior crossing the red line of attacking nuclear weapons. But then, if you take a look at the response from Western powers, Germany, France, for example, they blame Iran for the instability, for the conflicts. Now, it's, a lot of people would scratch their heads. Iran was being attacked, unprovoked, and then they blame Iran. What's the thinking here, and what they are?
I know. Okay. I noticed some of the Western powers' response, and I noticed there's several things. Number one is the France said that is Israel is a self-defense power, a defense rights, but the Britain and Britain and Germany and some other country just say something more moderate tone, such as try to de-escalate such kind of tight situation. They did not say that blame Iran too much, and France is exception. Even Japanese Prime Minister said that is unacceptable. So within the West Bloc, I don't really think there's a unit voice. And we can see the Gulf countries. You can see all the Gulf countries are against this kind of aggression. But one of the reasons, I think you can notice most of the Gulf countries, they only use foreign affairs minister spokesman, but not the major leader. So they would not like to be so outstanding to this kind of situation. They just try to pacify the situation, try to hope there will be the chance, if there's a chance to reopen the dialogue between United States and Iran, again, even indirect dialogue. And what, as you mentioned, what the Trump hope is after several strikes, Americans think, oh, it's enough, then force Iran to reopen the indirect dialogue with America, then make a deal, of course, in favor of American term. They think this way. So this is very complicated. And later, I think, 2 days later, there is something more, situation will develop in a new phase.
Right. Let me have Anna here. Do you agree? And will the U.S., Washington somehow can dictate the behavior of Israelis? Obviously, it's not the case.
Let me ask you a question. if another power took out your top general, the head of the the civilian espionage, your top scientists, do you think that would be, oh, let's sit down at the table and figure this out?
Very difficult.
There's no trust anymore. There's not going to be an agreement. And so this idea that countries are waiting around to see what happens, no, they're not. They don't want it to happen. And they don't want to be pulled in. That's why their statements have been so mild compared to where they could be. But this is the fear that everyone has, that two rogue states are going to drag the world into a regional war that has no end.
Do you think Trump is trying to prevent that?
No,
from happening?
Isn't.
No.
He doesn't make calculations. It's a day-to-day. He's much like Netanyahu. He moves from crisis to crisis. This crisis is perfect for him. It pulls away attention.
Kills, right?
Well, from the LA, from Musk,
right.
from his failed economic policies. It's an endless litany of things that he hasn't been able to do, but he keeps moving to new crises.
Professor Marandi, what's the plan? What's the goal of Iran? Yes, there is a response militarily, and probably also diplomatically, politically around the world. And then what's the intermediate goal of how to handling this process? How to protect and defend its national interests here?
Well, as pointed out, the United States and the Israeli regime are rogue actors. And it's very difficult to deal with the United States under these circumstances, and especially Trump. Just a couple of kilometers from here, in my home, last night they struck an apartment building and murdered 60 people. 20 of them were children. Actually, I'm going there this evening because I have an interview with an Arabic TV channel whose office is very close to that building. The Iranians, under these circumstances, have really no option but to respond and to continue punishing the Israeli regime until it is forced to change its behavior. The only acceptable outcome of this is for the regime to stop its aggression and for assurances that it won't be repeated. And the United States right now is the only reason why the Israelis behave like this. No one else accepts this behavior. Europeans, of course, they support the regime no matter what it does, but they don't have the role or the clout or the power that the United States has. So we have to put pressure on the United States to make them recognize that this policy of genocide in Gaza, genocidal attacks in Lebanon, dangerous attacks on Iran, this policy is leading the world towards great danger.
Yeah, and very briefly, we are seeing the oil prices, rose in response. Global impact.
Yeah, oil's up 7%. China gets 45% of its imported oil through the Straits of Hormuz. This is not going to work well economically, but this idea that you're going to pressure the United States into doing this, not under Donald Trump. So it's 3.5 years of more of the same.
Well, thank you for joining us as we unpacked the latest and the most critical developments in the Israel-Iran conflict. This is a complex, evolving situation with profound implications for the Middle East and the world. I'm Qinduo in Beijing. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.